So first off, ladies and gentlemen, before this video begins, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you so much for the crazy support on my previous video, which of course was the interview with James Gunn. The amount of comments I saw coming in on that video where everyone in this little small community that we have here was just so gassed up. The love was just so felt. Some of the reactions were not only heartwarming, but some were pretty funny too, just because now looking back on it, I did pretty much shadow drop the video, so I think a lot of people were caught off guard. If you haven't checked it out already, what are you doing? And also, New Rockstars, Screen Crush, and Go Read Some Comics with Jenna also had some interviews with James Gunn, so don't forget to check out their channels. But today's video, yeah, we've got to revisit the hot topic again, that is Warner Brothers Discovery, revealing that it is indeed exploring options for sale. For all of you who are wondering about my thoughts on various other news topics that have been coming out in the past couple of days, just know that I am going to get to it, hopefully in a video tomorrow. That's if nothing else crazy happens on the channel. But today we are going to go over how all of this is kind of going down, my thoughts on that, of course later on in the video, how this could impact DC in the future, and how all of this could even relate to a comment made by James Gunn in my interview with him. Wouldn't be surprised if another update comes out by the time I frickin' post this video, but regardless of whatever happens there, this is my take on the whole situation up until now. This goes back to one of the many headlines making buzz just a couple of days ago. The Hollywood Reporter writes, Warner Brothers Discovery is for sale after all, as multiple parties circle. And yes, this is absolutely true. You've probably very much so heard this by now, because it feels like updates are coming out every 6 hours for it. Again, by the time I post this, there's probably going to be another story in the development of it all. So this has basically now been declared by the Warner Brothers Board of Directors, claiming that it's received interest from multiple parties. Now, this is why I replied to a few people in my video before last, where I spoke about the whole topic of, let's talk about how the DCU is apparently over, where people seem to just think because Warner Brothers refused the first Paramount bid that all was okay. But I was like saying to some people, think of it like buying a house. If you're a seller, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to accept the first bid / offer, or even the second. And lo and behold, a second bid was supposedly put in by Paramount and it was rejected. Actually, scratch that, as I was doing notes for this video, there's now reportedly a third bid rejected, until perhaps, again, by the time I upload this, maybe a fourth one's come along and that was rejected or accepted or God knows what. But this story comes out of the New York Times saying that over the past 4 weeks, Paramount has made 3 offers, and some of the details for the offer were such that David Zaslav could stay on as co-chief executive and co-chairman of a combined company. And that's very interesting if any eventual deal does work out there with Paramount, and what we could be talking about later. But the article goes on to explain how they managed to get a look at the letter that David Ellison sent to Warner Brothers. And the details help explain what prompted the Warner Brothers announcement saying that, you know, the company was up for sale, obviously in an effort to essentially kick off a public frenzy of interest of potential suitors, including Comcast and Amazon, thus putting pressure on Paramount to increase their offers. Now, again, whether you saw it before or whether you're seeing it now, it does seem that it's always been Zaslav's endgame, kind of fattening up the goose of the company, so to speak. And regardless of what feelings you have for him, if you compare Warner Brothers to when it was sold by AT&T to where it's at now, especially with its most recent year and what they've achieved there, say what you will about various scrapped projects, tax write-offs, this, that, and the other, but the company and its assets have overall been put into a better position for a transaction like this to take place. That's why he put DCU on the track, right? Whereas the dying days of the DCEU, well, that freaking minecart fell off the track completely. Then he's started up a whole new Harry Potter thing. Granted, we haven't seen it, but it's still a prospect nonetheless under his kind of mandate of revitalizing IP from the glory days of Warner Brothers in the early 2000s. And of course, that includes Lord of the Rings with The Hunt for Gollum, which is in the future. We've heard rumors of a Lord of the Rings video game to rival the success of Hogwarts Legacy. And then again, the various successes of Warner Brothers this previous year. It ultimately just screams to other companies, you can say what you want about Mr. Zaslav, but all of this looks, shinier. And now everyone is wondering, okay, so who will land on top of this? Like, how will it even go down? Since they also explained in their full statement that they're exploring multiple options, whether that's considering a transaction for the entire company or rather just separate transactions for its Warner Brothers businesses and then Discovery Global businesses, so on, so forth. Now, I'm sure you've also observed how there's been quite a mix of news out there at the same time with all of this. Like, 1 minute, apparently Netflix is interested, but then we have a recent report like this from the Hollywood Reporter saying that Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos says that the streaming giant has little interest, if at all, in bidding for Warner Brothers Discovery, basically citing and getting into the whole they see themselves as more of a builder and not a buyer, and even say that purchases or mergers like this in the past haven't always panned out, and there's not always additional value in more ownership. And if all of that remains true and they don't look into acquiring even some aspects of its split businesses, then I'd be alright with the Batman Part 2 not going to streaming 10 days after its theatrical release. But jokes aside though, I think most people don't really want to see Netflix acquire Warner Brothers or certain aspects of their film division or whatnot. But as for talk for Apple, I think Apple would be a pretty cool choice. They actually produce some great shows on their streaming service, and the amount of people who don't realize that really shocks me. But again, I get it, right? Like, it's another streaming service to add on to the list of bills. But they put movies into theaters, and here they would be given new IP that they could absolutely play with, that I'd be inclined to believe that they would leave intact. And most importantly, my God, do they have the money? But according to Puck News, they don't seem that interested when they reported that Apple's top services executive came on the podcast called The Town and said, I never say no to anything, but we're not actively looking at buying any company of any size. So Apple's huge. And when it comes to Apple or even various other contenders, because of course there's places like Amazon as well. In his letter to Warner Brothers, apparently David Ellison of Paramount argued that they were Warner Brothers' only contender by saying other potential acquirers of Warner Brothers Discovery today or in the future would need to overcome significant, perhaps insurmountable, hurdles given their dominant market positions. But the reality is, as the New York Times points out here, the analysts say that no bidder, including Paramount, will be able to escape regulatory scrutiny. So yeah, like, all of that remains to be seen despite all of this sale talk. Then we have, Comcast, who was reported to be interested. This is an interesting choice. I've seen a lot of people talk about this, the idea of them merging their streaming service with HBO Max, and I see plenty of people liking the idea of a DC theme park at Universal. But to be honest, with like the various mixed signals being reported over the past few days, it kind of makes your head spin a bit. And I guess, for me, I just feel like as a result of that, I wouldn't truly rule out anyone, regardless of comments that may have been made from various people at the top of some of these companies. And in my bones, I don't know, but I feel like it is more likely that Paramount returning to the table after not only having done that once, but again, and then apparently again, will they come back again? Yeah, I think that is most likely the thing that will happen with this increased offer. Will perhaps be the outcome. But we just I know I keep saying this, but we do just have to wait and see. But it feels like a lot of this is to kind of keep adding more bait onto the fishing line to get Paramount to take an even mightier chomp. And then, of course, the question ripples out into the whole, from a lot of people here, okay, what is going to happen with the DCU and James Gunn, Peter Safran? And it's going to be hard to not repeat myself from the video I made about this topic last week, because the core message of what I was saying there is still ultimately the same for me, but to kind of just like incorporate it all into this larger discussion here, I still think that, let's just say, Paramount ends up eventually getting that bid in, or even if it was someone else, that business-wise, even though absolutely there could be still some things that are subject to change there under new leadership, it still wouldn't really add up to abolish everything that Warner Brothers Discovery has set up since the end of 2022 in rebuilding the DC brand. Sure, you could be like, but new top brass, new ego, new do-over. But again, they're also business people, and putting the public perception of the DC IP through the ringer with like another restart of DC films is just, no matter what side you lie on this, I really struggle to see the sense in that. And I think they would too, like right out the gate, that is. Then as for other things, no, I don't think they would do the whole yo-yo theory, if you will, and basically abolish the current rebuilding of the DC brand to just whiplash the public with a restoration of the Snyderverse, somehow get each and every actor back there. Like, to me, honestly here, that's all just self-explanatory, so I'm just going to leave that there. But as I mentioned in that previous video as well, could things still change in the next couple of years? Yes, of course they could in some ways. Like, I'm not going to be blind to that. So my opinion of this whole anticipation of change, no matter who the new top brass would be something like, okay, as the new transaction goes through and as they inherit these assets and divisions of Warner Brothers, again, however exactly that transaction will go through and what they absorb, DC Studios, etc., that doesn't mean at some point an understandable review of how things are being handled there wouldn't go down, right? Because that would make sense. I would do it myself. But I don't think that would happen right out the gate, as in, as soon as we hit this certain month in 2026, it's all doomer land, left, right, and center. I think for me, at least the way I'm seeing it right now, since Warner Brothers are pursuing a split for around mid-2026 timeframe, and the fact of the matter is that we, of course, have a couple of movies coming out next year, from Clayface, Supergirl, then we have the HBO series Lanterns, which could be an Emmy contender from what we've had teased. But more interestingly to this conversation is we have Man of Tomorrow starting to shoot in the spring of 2026. Also, the Batman Part 2, of course. Now, I think no matter who acquires all of this, we'll wait until those movies are out to really say one way or the other. I just don't see them just, again, like abolishing these movies in production, doing like a tax write-off Batgirl style to not put them out of kind of we're just gonna cancel the DCU to do our own thing because we own it now, just for all the reasons I just bloody mentioned. So this is why I'm saying, whoever owns all of this in the future, it would make sense for them to settle in, let these projects run their course, which takes us right to the end of 2027, and then going into 2028, yeah, you can maybe switch some things up after this reassessment, this evaluation, this kind of survey of how things are going. But I still think whatever eventual decisions they'd make, it would still be one that maintains the DCU canon. So rather reboot the universe again, there might be the whole, okay, we're not going to greenlight this project or that project. We're going to go this way instead of that way, or explore that kind of thing, rather than complete annihilation. Because I can just see a new owner wanting to continue to keep DC Studios a thing and just build and improve upon, possibly, if you want to phrase it that way, rather than dismantle. Again, for all the reasons I've gone on about at length. Now, the only spanner in the works there, which I'm very curious about, even with what I'm saying as my kind of rough prediction of how things could go, is James Gunn's and Peter Safran's contract at DC Studios. I believe they signed a deal for 4 years that I think is up towards the end of 2026. So, on the other hand, unlike Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi, who have not so long ago had their new deals, made at Warner Brothers, meaning Paramount, let's just say they purchased Warner Brothers, would inherit them and their contracts unless, they wanted to kind of buy them out, of course. Gunn and Safran will be in a place where Man of Tomorrow will be in post-production when their contracts are up. But at the same time, all in the midst of this whole Warner Brothers split and sale. So this is where the business side is beyond me, just given what I was saying a moment ago, with new owners, in my opinion, probably still trying to vibe and see things out until they get into 2028, after the Batman 2, after Man of Tomorrow are out. Like, do they just renew Gunn and Safran's deal under a more flexible, temporary, short-term contract rather than like a multi-year term? It's not like temporary extensions are uncommon in Hollywood, especially during major transitions like this. So that could be totally possible while things kind of get fleshed out at my rough predicted review date kind of thing. I do want to heavily stress, by the way, this is all just such conjecture from me, or if you hear it from anyone else, it is just speculation. No one truly knows. It's never black and white. There is nuance. Now, speaking of like nuance, right? After my interview with James Gunn, I've seen a lot of people focus on one comment in particular, and I don't blame them, by the way, at the same time, other than, kind of like doomer posting about it.
You've referenced things like Peacemaker Season 2 and Lanterns setting up different threads and arcs. How far do these arcs go? Like, do they culminate in Man of Tomorrow, or can we expect them to go further than that?
Yes, they definitely go significantly further than Man of Tomorrow.
Okay.
So now, whether or not that'll be me that's able to fulfill that promise depends on a lot of things in life. But yeah.
So first of all, yes. All while I obviously can't speak for James Gunn, in my opinion, I do believe that when we were chatting about this, it was perhaps in reference to technically if he can guarantee if he'll be here many, many, many years from now. But let's wind things back just for a second here. I said a similar thing over on Twitter. Go follow me there if you don't already, or Instagram. First of all, we were literally talking about how far the plot thread that specifically Lantern sets up goes into the future. Like, we're talking, as he said, significantly further than Man of Tomorrow. So basically something that could come to fruition years after 2027, given that's the release year of Man of Tomorrow. That plot thread is after that, significantly further. So yeah, plenty of places might doom post about this Gunn quote from my interview. But the way I honestly read what he says here is more from an honest and earnest remark of literally being like, well, yeah, like never say never, given that is so long away kind of thing, as to if you're going to see that plot thread from what Lanterns can set up way, 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 way down the line. Will I be the one to fulfill that? Depends on many things in life. Because yeah, can James Gunn promise to fulfill a plot thread that is many years away beyond 2027, when God knows what could change? In an industry of all places, Hollywood, that is a landscape that can be fairly volatile, to say the least. I mean, case in point with Warner Brothers being sold multiple times in just the last 10-ish years. Then, not to mention, he knows that his contract, he's probably very self-aware that his contract will be up in the air at some point, kind of relatively soon in the grand scheme of things, in the midst of this whole company thing going on right now. So can he promise that? Not exactly. Does he plan to fulfill that? Yeah. But as he said,
depends on a lot of things in life.
Exactly. Like, it depends on a lot of things in life. That's just being pretty reasonable and rational. It kind of gets into the whole thing I was on about earlier. I think, like, again, adding this into the speculation, I think whoever comes in will actually still maintain the DCU brand under DC Studios and stuff like that. But yeah, technically, Gunn's position isn't always a permanent guarantee. To believe that would be naive in my opinion, especially if by my rough predicted evaluation of DC Studios happens sometime around 2028 about its future, you know, if Man of Tomorrow, Clayface, and Supergirl, and whatever else didn't meet the larger company's expectations or their standards for profit, they might maintain the DCU's bedrock, but could they question the leadership at that point? Perhaps, but that's totally not an unreasonable response to give. And no, that doesn't mean that because he said that in response to specifically me asking about a plot thread that could be like 5 or so years away in DCU Chapter 2 until it's fully leaned into, that, oh, he's just calling it now. I think he was just asked this question and was like, yeah, whether or not that's going to be me to fulfill that promise depends on a lot of things in life. And then when you kind of hear it after this long rambly Boba response, it's like, yeah, it certainly does depend on a lot of things in life. But obviously you do have, you know, negativity sells, negativity gets clicks. So obviously anyone who is doom posting about how DC Studios is cooked or it's over or whatever, like Gunn is out, Gunn is fired, would instantly use that as like a little poison tip on their dagger. Like it's very simple, but I don't think it's that black and white at all for all the reasons I said. So that is what I wanted to get into in today's video, guys. I will be getting into other news topics tomorrow. If there's another update with the whole Warner Brothers thing, I'll tack that onto a news roundup. News roundup is much overdue. This is a news video, but more of a 1-2 topic one. So with that being said, would love to hear your thoughts down below. There's a lot of wait and see with this, but nevertheless, yeah, there's still quite a bit to discuss at the same time. Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate you hitting the like button, the hype button if you have it available in your location. Consider subscribing, of course, for more news videos just like this, and God knows what else I could shadow drop on the channel one day. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.